Welcome to Hope in the Halls, Christian voices from Washington, D.C., sponsored by Hope to the Hill, also sponsored by Can We Pray, with your hosts Nathan and Amber Kistler. Learn more about Hope to the Hill at www.hopetothehill.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Hope in the Halls. How are you today, Nate?
I'm great. I am great. We are free. I don't know. That sounds really bad. We're not free of your sister.
No.
She's gotten married.
She has gotten married.
We're very excited for her.
I don't want to be free from her.
We're not free from her. She's just a married woman now.
She is. And we are post-wedding is what we are now. Yeah. We've had a long few days just trying to get ready for everything. It's been like really hectic.
Hospital visit. Yeah. Getting ready for
Got done with that. And then I came home and I had two weddings. I had one right before my sister's and then I had Autumn's. And so I was decorating and planning and making sure everything was perfect the way that she wanted it. And she was the easiest bride ever. She really, honestly, like my sister was nowhere near a bridezilla. She was just like, sure, whatever you think. And we would have to continually say, Autumn, what do you want? This is your day. What do you want it to be like? What do you want it to look like? And she was just so easygoing. And now I think she's glad it's over. And they are in the Grand Cayman with our friend Noelle Williams right now.
Yes. Yeah. And I got a text from her husband this morning. Actually, he sent a picture of all the groomsmen to me this morning. Actually, to all the groomsmen. I don't want to say he just sent it to me, but just thanking us for being part of the wedding. And it really was a beautiful day. The weather was hot.
Yes.
But once the sun went down, it was just gorgeous. We had a really great time. And,
yes, it was.
So the wedding's over. But today, we want to talk about something we've wanted to talk about for a few weeks. And obviously, I know that we're a little behind on our normal 2 episodes a week. And we were supposed to be recording with Tim Ballard and Eduardo Verástegui last week. And because Verástegui.
You just like saying it at this point.
It's great, yeah. Yeah. So my dad, when he first met Eduardo, he said, Eduardo Verástegui. And so I give him a hard time about that. But
so many different people have said his last name in a million different ways at this point.
Yeah. Actually, and my favorite, so this is funny. I think it's quite funny. But when I was at Trump's place in New Jersey, we were, I don't remember if we were in the house or we were outside, but, we were outside. We were about to watch the movie, and President Trump, he was introducing Tim Ballard, and my impression of Trump is not great, okay? I'm just going to preface that, but...
It's really not.
It's not. But he walked out and he said, no, where's Tim Ballard? Tim Ballard's out here, fantastic. He said, and Jim Caviezel. And everybody started laughing. And Jim said, it's Caviezel. He goes, Caviezel, Kazizi.
He never got it right.
He never got it right. But he said it with such confidence. It was really fun. We all laughed over that. But so everybody's names were getting butchered except for Tim Ballard. I guess it's an easy white guy name. So
speaking of, have you seen that thing online where they show all the faces of the presidents, like when they first go into office and then when they come out past their terms, and literally Trump hasn't changed a bit.
I'm sorry. When you said that, I was thinking of the one that went around. Yes, it's true. But I was thinking of the one that went around Facebook and stuff when, goodness gracious, what's his name? That the Democrats, Bernie Sanders, was running for president, and it had Bush before, Bush after, Obama before, Obama after, and then it had Bernie Sanders and a skeleton.
Oh my goodness.
And we always thought that one was funny. But anyways, on that note, we're going to talk about something today that we were pretty excited to talk about. We wanted to share with you. And that is the issue of term limits. We've had some of the questions we've had, people asking what we thought about term limits. So I kind of want to dive into that.
It's a very interesting topic, really, because it's such a hot topic right now. And it
is on one side, at least.
Yeah. I mean, on one side. Well, I mean, it really is on both. I'm saying like both sides have their debates about it, of what they think it should and shouldn't be. But
right.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like I think is becoming more we're becoming more aware of as we watch the media, because nowadays, what was that?
That was my phone disconnecting from the machine. My apologies.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that was a little commercial break.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So I think nowadays it's so hard, especially when you're in front of the media all the time, or if you're a public figure, you can't do anything that the media doesn't capture anymore.
That's true.
You can't just have a bad day and it not show up on a C-SPAN, Fox, CNN, MSNBC. It's going to go everywhere. If you've had a bad day, and honestly, they want to know when you've had a bad day, which is sad. But I've watched recently some of the members of Congress, some of the senators, even our president. And it's been kind of heartbreaking to watch them grow older, maybe is the better.
Yeah, no free passes anymore these days. You don't get any free passes. Yeah, you're right. And I think if you look back, obviously we didn't have TV and radio. I mean, thinking back to, was it President Roosevelt?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't Roosevelt. I'm sorry. It was, my brain's not working at the moment. But, you know, the president that was, well, maybe it was Theodore Roosevelt.
I think, no, you're right. It was Roosevelt.
Right?
Yeah. Polio, right?
Yeah. Nobody knew. He kind of kept that hidden for years.
Yeah, there wasn't really
there was no TV.
There was no TV.
Yeah,
so it was totally a different time back then, and now everything is on. Every move you make, and it's not just the news. It's all over Facebook. It's all over Instagram. It's TikTok is a huge, huge platform now. So much so that even the news outlets have a TikTok. I mean, it's just it's everywhere. I mean, you cannot make a wrong move or even a right move and it not be posted somewhere for the world to watch and see.
No, I agree.
And I was watching, you know, the one that comes to my mind so evidently is Senator Mitch McConnell. And I know people have probably seen this. I think now he's had 2 episodes of this happen.
Yeah.
Where he's been talking to the news outlets, and then all of a sudden he just goes into this blank stare, which I don't think that we really know what's going on. They haven't necessarily announced it, and I don't know that they want to necessarily right now. Yeah. But if I'm looking, I have seen that look before in family members that have gone through this. My own personal perspective is that I think he's having strokes. That's what it looks like. My best friend Melody, her mom went through this. She was there when her mom actually had her stroke for the first time ever. And Melody told me the story of her mom, and she said she was just talking, and then all of a sudden it was like she was looking through her. Melody said I would talk to her and I would try to get her to respond. She wouldn't respond. And it was like she was just, even though she was looking at her, she was looking through her. And that was what he looked like to me. It was like he would just talk and then he was just gone mentally. Yeah. He was just gone for a few minutes. And it's so sad because then I would get on Facebook or I would get on TikTok and everybody made a meme out of it. And they were making jokes and laughing and, you know, and using it for something else, whether it be like, you know, how I feel when the Falcons lose, you know, or something stupid like that. And to me, it's just so, number one, it's disrespectful. Number two, it's heartbreaking. Because if that were your grandparent or your parent up there, you would not find it funny. And he is someone's grandfather. He is someone's father. And to them, it's not funny. And I can't imagine the conversations that are probably going on behind closed doors that we will never hear about, that his family members are probably like, he's got to step down. This is not, it's not about the country anymore. It's about for him. And it is a little bit about the country, because then you start questioning like, okay, is he making these decisions like as a senator, or is someone else making these decisions for him? Who is really running his seat as a senator now? If this is happening not just once, but twice, who is making those decisions in his office? Because I don't know that I trust, not that, you know, we don't love Mitch McConnell and that he's a great man or whatever your belief is about him. But when you've seen that happen twice on television, it makes you a little bit worried about someone who's in such a high position. And that's why term limits have become such a hot topic.
Yeah. And then, you know, Senator Dianne Feinstein, I remember in my early days in Washington, she was a very vivacious, you know, person, and was always known as being a very tough person, you know, from the bench, if you want to call it. When she was in committee questioning people, she was tough. And to see her now over the last few months, I mean, she has some severe health issues, and just in the last month or so, it's been a similar instance on her side where they, prop her up to the desk and she doesn't even really know where she is. And so the question begs to be asked at that point with both of these scenarios, and there's others.
Yeah. Even RBG, when she was, a Supreme Court justice, she was so sick.
Well, and the funny part about her is that was the assumption that people had for years. And I had not seen her for a while. At least I had not talked to her really one-on-one, maybe one time, just very, very short. And I was in the court for a thing, and I think my parents were actually with me that day at a dinner, the same dinner, one of those you had gone to with me. And, because she kind of looked like she was slumped over, and she walked over and said, it's nice to see you, Justice Ginsburg. And I said, how's your, I think it was maybe it was me or my dad, but one of us said, we heard you have a new workout book coming out. And she lifted her head up and looked right at us, and she goes, and I got a DVD coming too. And she talked like that, just made her so happy. And so sometimes people assumed that she was, that was 2 years before she passed away. But yes, at the very end of her time, she was very sick.
But then you even have President Biden, who falls all the time. And it has now become a thing that people now connect to him with, whether he's going up the airplane steps. And honestly, I don't agree with anything politically with Joe Biden, right? There's nothing politically that we agree with him on. But it does break my heart to watch an older or an elderly person who's falling down all the time, and they're doing it on national media. And I get it. He's the president of the United States. I understand, he asked for that attention when he ran. It still doesn't mean that it doesn't break my heart to watch it, because it's really sad. And it's not just the falling. It's him not being able to finish a sentence or even be able to say the right words. Or
John Fetterman from Pennsylvania.
That's another one.
He makes me very, very, and he's, that one was tough, during the election cycle. But I think the bottom line, that we're trying to get to is when you look at people, obviously for me, I look at those scenarios and say, one, these are the people running our country. It's actually very sad for our country. It's very sad. Because we people don't take us seriously as a nation when they can't take our leaders seriously. It's like, when you go to England, people made fun of Boris Johnson, when he was the PM.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's the same thing happens in many different countries, especially in countries in the Western Hemisphere. But beyond that, and it goes to the point we've made, I think, the very first or second episode of the podcast, with people we disagree, we look at people this way as well. We may disagree with them on issues and make fun of them because of the issues they're having. And as Christians, what is our obligation? And this leads into a conversation I think is very important. One of the issues that I have had, and some people are not going to like this. I'm just going to preface this, okay? One of the issues that I have had with President Trump over the last 6-7 years is the name calling. And most people go, well, he's just standing up for himself, yada yada, whatever. And I understand, he's been through a lot. There's been a lot of craziness that's happened. But set that aside. Just because Donald J. Trump is a name caller doesn't mean that we're supposed to be name callers.
Right.
As Christians, again, we're called to a higher standard in how we treat people. And oftentimes, and you can call it an excuse and all that, one of the biggest issues that I've heard from the other side, from, maybe the Democratic side is, people, they call us names and da-da-da-da. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. And I hear a lot of conversations about, well, we need, this, we need to stand up and fight for this. We need to fight, fight, fight. And at least, this is my favorite one, at least this person is doing something.
Right.
I've heard that a lot too. Also, I was sitting talking to a member of Congress at dinner about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And he said, I keep hearing the term, we need to fight fire with fire. And he said, that makes no sense. He said, you're
just going to make a bigger fire.
Yeah, right. He said, right. He said,
it's always been a dumb statement to me.
But he said, we as Christians are called to do something different than what everybody else is doing. You can't fault people who aren't Christians for doing what non-Christians do.
Right.
We're called to act differently, to be called to a different standard, to be better. And that is where, as God's children, we have to really start to think a little bit differently about how we're interacting with these people and how we're interacting with people on social media. Because social media is the scourge of humanity in some regards.
Yes,
because it's so easy for people to be on a keyboard. I'm gonna get them good today, and that's not what we're called to do.
A lot of people think that nowadays standing up for what you believe in is making a post, and
I'm doing something.
You're not doing anything. You're not changing anybody's mind with a Facebook status or commenting on theirs. You're not. But we've talked about what you spoke about earlier about Trump a lot. I mean, we have literally had that conversation hundreds of times. Yeah. Especially during the election of 2020, I would say. We really had that conversation and why we think the country shifted and there's the whole issue of was it
Well, let me clarify too on that thing. I love personally 99.6% of the policies that Trump, instituted as a president.
Because as Christians, we benefited the most from it.
We did.
I mean, he was very, very open to anything to do with Christianity. He was one of the best presidents to allow that into the White House.
No, I'm grateful for all of that.
Yeah.
But this is the big clincher here, I think, with this, and this is where often I've struggled, where if you were to, let's say it this way, as Christians, we're called to be like Daniel.
Right.
And I love Chaplain Black. We've talked about this many times. Daniel was an incredible, incredible man. He lives through 5 kings, some good kings, some bad kings, some really bad kings. And what does he do through all of those kings? It starts with a bad one when he's brought into captivity, and it ends with a bad one when God writes, with his hand on the wall. And Daniel, through all of those things, even at that point, that last king, they even forgot that he was alive still. So he's been out of the picture for some time, long enough for the king to go, is Daniel still living? And they find him, and he tells him, your days are numbered, essentially. And within a very short amount of time, the kingdom is overrun. But the beautiful part about Daniel's life is he spoke the truth no matter what. Yeah. Even when he ends up in the lion's den, he ends up potentially in really bad situations.
Death situations.
Yes, he speaks the truth. So to preface all of that, to say this, sometimes over the last few years, if you are to say, well, you know what, this is not okay, you're deemed a anti-Trump or all these different things. You get thrown into that thing.
I mean, really, it's either side can make you do that.
They do.
It's both sides. There's no. We always talk about how we feel so out of place because we feel like we are just somewhere in the middle in a lot of areas.
We want to be balanced in life. We want to be balanced in ministry. We want to be balanced in all these different ways. And when you start having discussions like this, so you get into that realm. So I want to preface all of that by saying, I love the policies. I love all of this. And on a personal note, when I met, I've been around President Trump, super nice.
Yeah. And his whole family was nice.
Amazing. Yeah. I got to know
very kind people.
Both of his sons and met Ivanka and even their youngest daughter when he was president. I have a lot of respect for what they've built, for their family, and they've been very kind to us. We've been around them. That being said, the one downside when I was at his house in Bedminster was, and I caught myself because it's funny, like you catch yourself laughing because he was name calling people even outside, but then I caught myself and said, well, that's not really funny. That I don't need to laugh at that. So we have to be very careful as Christians in how we are interacting with and about other people. And one of the most difficult things for me over the last 6 years has been this. As Christians, we have to be prepared, even if someone is the head of our, who the party that we most identify with, that we don't let certain things slide because they're the head of our party or whatever. We have to be willing to speak the truth and say, you know what? No, that part's not okay. I love this about you, but this part, we need to work on. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a biblical premise that we need to be people who are truth bearers.
Right.
And we have somewhat lost that on a general scale. And we need to get that back. And it's part of the morality that Christians, we carry that banner as little Christs. And so we have an obligation with that. And I think it's very important to note. Another thing that I will say, and again, this one's not going to be very popular. Probably the only other major thing that I had some disagreement with when it came to the last couple election cycles, from an internal perspective, because there's two things that I am unashamedly, we are, as an organization, as people, two things that we will never apologize for. I'm pro-life,
yep,
and we're pro-marriage.
Absolutely.
And those are the two issues. We don't run around and we know people who have had abortions. We've loved on them. We know people that are gay people, that are married to gay people, that we have tried to love on. That doesn't change the fact.
It doesn't change what we believe.
Yeah, it doesn't change the fact that, of how God looks at that issue and how we look at it. But we're never going to hate people for that.
No, never.
But I will never apologize for it's not just what I believe, but what God's word says on those
Absolutely.
issues. So
yeah, there's no argument with it.
No, not for me on those two things. And so one of the biggest, I don't want to call it a downfall, one of the biggest shifts that I saw through the 2016 election was the normalization of homosexuality in the Republican Party. We saw it happen. It was very clear. And, Christians oftentimes tried to, say, well, Trump, everything that Trump does is amazing. It's amazing, amazing. And most of the time I would agree with the policy stuff when it comes to that. But what I did see happen before 2016 and that whole cycle, you would never hear at all about homosexuals in the Republican Party. They were not open. They were there, but they were not open about it. And that shifted after the 2016 election. Not to say that, they shouldn't, be honest about who they are, whatever. But we watched some of that shift, and I believe that a lot of that was from the Trump presidency. So I say all of that not to browbeat those folks, but to say that is one of the negative parts, I think, of President Trump's presidency, that we as Americans and Christians often overlook. And one of the things that I was very disappointed in that whole process in. That being said, either way, both sides, we need to be known as truth tellers, truth speakers, and people, more importantly, people that show the love of Jesus Christ to everybody. And so, as we step into this next election cycle, to get back to the initial conversation at hand, do I believe, Amber, do we believe that there should be term limits? Yes.
Yeah.
Why is that the case, too? I think if we look back at our Christian heritage at the beginning of America, our forefathers were farmers, small lawyers. They didn't intend on becoming lifelong politicians. People would leave their farms, leave their practice, whatever they were, They would come serve for a time, they would go home. We had never envisioned on having 40, 50, 60-year careers in politics. And so today, we've got to put some checks and balances in place, I think, for those folks. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think going back to the whole thing of when, I was waiting, but you kind of went past it, but I'll go back to it, is the Trump thing. I think what bothered me the most in that point of history is that there were so many Christians that weren't willing to call him out when he was wrong.
I agree.
And I'm not just talking about everyday Christians. I'm talking about national pastors on a bigger scale who were in his office, and all of that is great. I mean, when a president will welcome pastors in his office to pray over him, that's wonderful. Do I believe that Trump is a Christian? I don't know, because we talked about that before. We don't ever know the hearts of men. Only God knows the hearts of men. Now, there are plenty of people that said for him that he was. I don't know that Trump has ever said out loud that he was to people. I think he maybe believes in God. Do I know that he has a personal relationship? I don't know. And I don't think I'll ever know. But I think what bothered me the most was that they were willing to praise him for whatever he did, but were also willing to turn a blind eye when something was wrong.
And even claim on his behalf
that it really wasn't his fault,
or claim that he
make
was
an
a Christian,
excuse.
claiming something that he had never claimed. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great point. One of the things that you and I both actually respected him for, and do respect him for still, was the fact that he didn't try to wear religion on his sleeves. Every politician in the last 50 years
and we've
does
talked
that.
about this too. Pence was the reason that Christians were brought to the table with Trump, because Pence is a very outspoken about his Christian faith. And it was because of him that it even brought Christians to the table, and, Christianity to the table for Trump. And so that was all kind of forgotten when the 2020 election happened and things didn't pan out the way that they thought it should. And Pence did what he thought was the best thing in the constitutional right. And then everybody threw Pence to the wolves and said, we hate you because you didn't do what we wanted you to do. And even though he did what he felt was right in the moment. Now, everybody has their opinions on what that should be. I am not even going to try to go down that road right now. But I'm just saying it's so crazy and mind-boggling to me how this man, this Christian man who I have known as a Christian man since before he ever became vice president of the United States, when he was governor, of Indiana. Bill and Gloria had a wonderful relationship with Mike Pence. And still do. Yeah. And he and Karen are wonderful people. And everybody just loved him when they're doing, when he's doing exactly what they want him to do. But the moment that he did what he felt the Constitution told him he had to do, everybody hated him. And suddenly his Christianity is called into question. His character is called into question. I mean, everything was thrown out the window because Trump didn't win. And that is just it in a nutshell. That is exactly what it was. It was because Trump didn't win. It is all his fault. If he had just given 10 more days, I kept hearing that from people, 10 more days. Okay, so let's just say he did, right? We've talked about this many times. If he gave 10 more days, we would still be where we're at.
Yeah, let's set aside the constitutionality of that. Yes, I agree with that totally. And I guess this was probably the hardest part of that whole ordeal for me. I've known, just as you said, Mike Pence to be an honorable man, not just an honorable man, but a godly man. That in his private office, that nobody, not a showy thing, to walk into his private office and see his Bible laid out, where he had obviously rushed out to go to a meeting.
Exactly. And that's not an office that's there for tours.
No, nobody gets, that's his, it's as big as the office we're in right now.
It wasn't planted there. It's not a decor piece.
Yeah.
It was something that was there that he was reading, literally reading. And I believe that he read it every single day.
I believe that. I do. So either somebody, you can't be the most honorable, godly man that anyone's ever met for 25 years and suddenly
Be the worst.
Yeah. So either he was who he says he was the whole time, or he wasn't. To me, I mean, you prove consistent character, you prove all these things for years, and all of a sudden, he's not. I don't believe that could be the case for him in the sense of the way people played it out to be. The other piece of that whole situation was what Mike Pence had that nobody else had in America, in which everybody becomes constitutional scholars, at that point. But he had the access to the Supreme Court of the United States to ask those questions to. And he said, I don't have that power. Whether or not you like it or agree with it, it doesn't really matter. He made a decision and you may not like it, and that's okay. This is the thing that I want to, it leads to this, and I think it's very important to note. You remember this, the day after Trump won in 2016. Well, you wouldn't remember this, but I do, and I've told you this story. I was in a Bible study with Chaplain Black, Senate Chaplain Black. And the majority of the Bible study there is, it's a mixture, Republicans and Democrat staffers
it's
and
a mixture.
Things. But I remember half the room was disappointed that day. Half the room was elated. And he got up and he could sense it. I knew he could as soon as
There's tension.
There's 200 people in the room, and I knew you could tell. And he said, okay, in only the way that Chaplain Black can. He said, well, good morning. Who here believes that King Nebuchadnezzar was the will of God for the children of Israel? And everybody kind of looked at him. He goes, go on, I need raise your hands. And everybody started slowly raising their hands. And he said, okay, one more question. Who of you believes that Donald Trump is the will of God for America today? And people, they started slowly raising their hands again. The point that he was making, and I want to make it on the flip side of that, because conservative evangelicals looked at Donald Trump becoming president as the will of God. Democrats, if they were Christians, did not view that at the time. Chaplain Black made a beautiful point there that I think is important to remind ourselves of on the flip side. And that is, God is still on the throne and he's still sovereign and knows what's going on and allows, and even, as the Bible says, he sets up kings. He sets up people in those places. So do I believe that President Biden is the will of God for America right now? Yes. There's no doubt in my mind that God has either allowed or placed him in that position. And why can I say that with such confidence? Because of the ministry that we have seen done, what God has done over the last 3.5 years. It is undeniable with what you and I have seen, and George and our whole team.
Well, and while it is, I do believe that Trump was the will of God, I also think that at some point, Trump became God to a lot of Christians.
I agree. That's very good point.
So I have this belief that God used Trump in a very unique way. Look what happened with Israel and all the good things that he did to promote Christianity, to make things happen that I believe God was very pleased with. Roe versus Wade. All of those things were happened because of who he put on the Supreme Court. Yep. That was able to happen. And I truly believe God used him to allow those things to happen. Yeah. Like God can use anybody, right? I mean, he used a donkey, made it talk. So he can use anybody.
He can.
Or anything. But there was a point. There came a point, and it's still prevalent now, where he became God to a lot of Christians. And while it benefited Christianity for him to be in office, it looked bad on Christianity to a lot of people on the other side who may not believe in God, because they were watching. They were watching all of us, and they were watching Christians who were a part of all of that, and they were mean and yelling and full of hate. And I'm careful when I say this, but a lot of that came from him. The name calling, all of that gets stirred up, because of his leadership and telling people, this is what we got to do. This is funny. We got to treat people this way. And like you said, we agree with 99.8% of his politics, but there was that part of him that I don't like, that I really don't agree with, that I wish would get better, maybe I should say.
And I'm not saying that God can't use him again.
No, I know.
Or whoever,
But what I'm saying is they adopted some of his personality when that had never happened with a president before. I mean, he really was a revolutionary change from what we had seen in past history. I mean, you're talking about a president who literally became like a god to people, and it became a cult-like following. And still has that cult-like following. And from meeting him, there is something about his personality that when that man walks into the room, I've been around him when he's walked into the room, it is electrifying. Yeah. You can't help but be magnetized to him. And when he walks into the room, first of all, he's a big dude. He's tall. He's broad-shouldered. I mean, he's not somebody that like when you walk up to, you're just like, oh, yeah, hey. No, he is like, you're looking up at him every single time.
Yeah.
And not only that, he's brilliant. He's a brilliant-minded businessman who is obviously
genius.
Marketing genius, been successful his entire life. He's hardworking. There's no doubt about it. I don't think he ever slept during his presidency.
No, I don't think so.
he's being fought every time he turns around. Someone is trying to put him down in some form or another.
I'm not trying to negate any of that.
No, and that's why I'm saying all that. I agree. I'm not trying to negate anything about, because I know what he's going through. I know what people have tried to do to him, what they're trying to do right now, the injustice that has been done to him. If you're going to hold one accountable, then you might as well start back from the past and go through every president that's had, womanizing issues or whatever you want to call it. It's just that part is mind-boggling to me that we're going to pick him. And I think they pick him for a reason because they know he's so powerful as a president. They know what he did for our country and they don't like it.
Yep.
And they know the following that he has. And right now, unfortunately, their candidate, if it still goes the way that it is heading, which is Joe Biden, is a very weak candidate for the Democratic Party. I mean, just by watching him, it is a very weak candidate for them. Now, we don't know if that's going to stay that way. That could change. Anything could change in D.C. But the thing with Trump, though, that we always said through 16 and on was the name calling, the bullying was a problem. And in anything that he did wrong, a blind eye was turned by Christians. And I think we could have done a better job in that moment to say, you know what? He shouldn't say that. He should not do that. And not make excuses for him, because I would watch pastors and preachers make excuses for the man. I'm talking about cuss words, whatever it was. It was like all of a sudden everything that they had preached on and believed went out the window because it was Trump. And so for me, that was disheartening to watch, because when you're looking at us from another side, if I am, let's just not even say a liberal. I mean, because Republicans cannot be Christians too. I don't want to just make the mindset that you got to be liberal to not be a Christian. Anybody who was not a believer, who was looking on the outside in, would look in that and go, wow, you are not really secure in your faith. Because if you can be changed that quickly, then why would you want me to change to that? Because what I'm doing is
why would
I look the same as you?
Yeah.
If you're okay with that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So, and in some forms, they weren't okay with what he was doing with the name calling. They were better than we were.
Yeah.
When you look at it from that standpoint.
And why would I want what you have?
If that's the way you're going to treat people.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think we could have done a better job as Christians during that period of time to better edify the body of Christ and to more so shine the light of Jesus and be what he would have had us to be. And even though we loved President Trump, still do, and his policies and all of that. And I do think there are moments where he's really funny. I'm not going to lie. He is very witty. But I think
coming from a witty person,
he's very quick. He's very quick-witted.
Yeah.
And I just look back at that time and I go, man, we really missed it. We really missed our opportunity to really show who we were, and to stand up for wrong when it was wrong, and then to stand up for right, because we're really good at standing up for things that we think are right, injustice and all of that stuff. But when it doesn't look cool to call out a president who's really, really popular.
When you have a seat at the table.
When you have a seat at the table.
We'll have a seat at the table.
Yeah. That's when it's a test. And I think a lot of people failed. I think a lot of Christians failed during that time. And I hope that we learned our lesson from that, because if he does get back in office, that's going to happen again. Those tests are going to keep coming. And I hope that we have learned from that. I truly believe that God said in that moment, okay, if he is your God, then I'm going to remove him. And then you're going to see what it's like to not have as much freedom as you had when he was in office.
Yeah, and that, again, that I think that's the interesting part. I think all of that is actually very beautifully said. But to add one little piece on the end of that, because I think all of that is so important. But the one thing I would add is, even in spite of all of that, even in spite of God allowing, choosing whatever he's done, to have what we have right now, the freedom that we've had to do ministry, the freedom we've had to pray with people that we had not had otherwise,
right,
has been overwhelming.
Yeah.
So even in the midst of those difficult times, I mean, and I think one of the greatest stories in the Bible on that very issue is the story of Joseph. When things look their bleakest, it says, the Bible doesn't even say that Joseph hears the voice of God in at least, we don't know exactly, but at least 15 to 20 years. He's on his own. And things, he does right, and things get worse.
Yeah, I know.
Every time. I mean,
how many people have felt that too?
Yeah, right.
Like, okay, God, I'm doing everything I know to do, and it's just getting bad down here.
We've felt that way, even just this week.
Yeah.
When it comes to, Amber being in the hospital, and you ask the question, and it's hard as a husband to hear that question. What you said, Lord, I feel like I've done everything you've asked me to do. Why now? Why more?
Yeah.
Why this? Joseph goes through that. I know he had to think it,
Especially when you're watching people who do all the wrong things and life just seems to go okay for them,
Yeah.
But God never promised that this life would be easy as a follower.
And so, Joseph goes through this horrible stuff, and it gets worse and worse and worse.
Look at Job.
Yeah, right. But Job at least is, he's hearing from God, know, and it's maybe not, we don't know how long the time period that Satan is afflicting Job. We don't, I don't know. But the reason I love the story of Joseph is the whole time God is working, not just for Joseph's sake, but he's saving his entire people. The people of Israel are saved through the line of Joseph, and all the stuff he went through, God taking him to the top tier of Egypt and, and leadership, it saves his people. So when we look at these moments right now, when we think things are so bleak, they're awful, God is still in control. He's working through all of this, and we're seeing God move. We had a staffer got saved just in the last few weeks.
Yep.
So people are getting saved. God is doing things.
Revival is happening in Auburn right now?
Yeah, all over the country. Members of Congress are more open about their faith than they've ever been, at least as long as I've been in Washington. I mean, we had a conversation with a member a few days ago, and to hear them talk about the difference from when they came to Washington 18 years ago, when they thought it was about partisan politics, and then they said, it's not about that. It's about hearts being changed.
Yep.
That, to me, I had a young man that called this morning and wanted to do an interview, homeschooled young man. He was so nice. I was just telling you before we came on.
Yeah.
And he said, what is the greatest triumph you've had? That was the first question he asked. Since you've been in Washington. I said, man, that's a tough one. You got me. And I thought about it, and, after the fact, and I may call him back and change the answer. The greatest triumph that I could ever think of is the change in the lives of members of Congress when they understand the spiritual component to why they're there. It's not about politics. It's about the hearts of people. And so at the end of the day, to end maybe this episode, if you take these things away from this episode, it's this. Be kind. Look at people as Jesus sees them.
Be mindful.
Yes. Be mindful of the calling that we have as Christians to love people, but also to not be people who are name callers and all those things. Our obligation as Christians, be mindful of it. And really beyond that, pay attention to what God is doing around you. Because
He's always moving.
He is. He's working every single day. And we get to watch it. It's awesome to watch history happening. And when God's doing things in history, I mean, what an incredible opportunity we've been given. We don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
But I know we've talked about a lot today. And,
I heard, just to end it with this, I thought this was a really cool way of putting this into perspective. I heard a preacher on Instagram, they'd put up a video, and he said, a lot of us, when you get older, you turn on the news to figure out what your future is going to look like.
Yeah.
He said, it's time to turn off the news and open up the Bible, because your future's laid out. You already know what the future is.
Yeah.
We know how it ends. So why worry about everything in the middle?
Yeah.
If you know how it ends, why worry about all the little details in the middle when He already has it all figured out?
Yeah.
All of it. Now, that's easier said than done. I
Yep.
totally understand, especially right now in our life.
Yes.
I
Yes.
completely understand that is easy preaching and hard living, and I'm not even necessarily preaching it to everybody else and even to myself.
Yeah.
But it was very inspiring to really just, when you sit down and you think about that, and you're just like, why would I watch a TV show, or why would I go, in our case, I'm going to go to a doctor that's going to tell me about my future. All those things are great. We need the doctors. We need, the people that are reporting and telling us what's going on in the world. But at the end of it all, we know how it ends. I'm not going to worry about the small details, because he's already got it figured out.
Yeah.
I'm questioning it. He's not. He's not questioning
That's
it
good.
at
That's
all.
really good.
And so I'm just going to learn, and it's hard for me because I don't want to say I'm a control freak. I'm a planner. I like to have plans. I like to have plans laid out. So
You're about 2 degrees short of a control freak.
maybe I don't want to control people.
No, you don't.
I don't want to say I'm that kind of a control freak.
you're not.
It's more about myself in my own life, really. It's hard for me to let go and let God control my life. I don't
right.
really care about what other people do. I'm not trying to control other people
not
at
at
all.
all.
But when it comes to me, I always make sure I have my ducks in a row. And
You have situational awareness where you like everything to be done the best that it can be done.
right.
And that's actually one of your greatest traits, because I
A
want things
lot
to
of
be done.
times, what our greatest
well.
traits are is our greatest struggles
Yes.
and
Well,
weaknesses.
and I'm the opposite in the sense of I like things to be done well, but you're very organized and I am not.
Also, one of your greatest weaknesses.
I'm a little more like, we'll figure it out. It's going to be great. And you're like,
Oh,
well,
it
let's
drives me
plan.
crazy.
Let's plan this out.
But it's a good balance
It is
in a
for
marriage.
us.
It's been a
It
great
is.
balance.
And it has been an amazing, I mean, it's hard to believe, almost 5 years, but God has just done some amazing things. And we hope that maybe today, we've talked about a lot, but maybe today you've been encouraged a little bit, maybe a lot, and maybe you've gotten hit upside the head a little bit or right between the eyes. Because
You
these
may
are,
have hated us through half this thing.
Yeah, you maybe. I
Maybe
don't-
you love us again.
and I
we don't
don't really care because
because we love you either way.
we do. And God wants us. These are things that we have been dealt harshly with.
Yeah.
I think from the Holy Spirit that and how we need to interact with people and how we need to see them. And so we don't say any of these things today. Look, I love our current president. I love him because Jesus has called us to love him. I pray for him. I prayed for Donald Trump every day. I pray for our current president. I pray for the president that will step into the Oval Office next year. And I pray for you. I'm excited about what God's going to do. He's doing exciting things. So be encouraged today. We love you guys. And we'll see you next episode.
That's right. And don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, whether that's Apple, Amazon, or Spotify.
And if you want to leave us a review, leave a great one. If you're not happy with us today, just don't leave one at all.
We'll see you guys next week.
All right. Bye.